Musa representing Niger East. I lead debate on the National Rural Employment Guarantee Bill 2021. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I'm delighted to lead the debate on this very important bill, which seeks to provide for the enhancement of livelihood security of the households in rural areas of the country by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in every financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. It also seeks to provide a safety net for the rural poor with the potential to boost rural income, stabilize agricultural production, and reduce rural-urban migration. The bill was read the first time on Tuesday, 22nd June 2021. This bill introduced a national anti-poverty program which will offer up to 100 days of unskilled manual labor per year on public works projects. The objectives of the bill are to enhance livelihood security in rural areas by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in a financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work. Ensure a strong social safety net for the vulnerable groups by providing a fallback employment source when other employment alternatives are scarce or inadequate. Ensure growth engine for sustainable development of an agricultural economy through the process of providing employment on works that addresses causes of chronic poverty such as drought, deforestation, and soil erosion. Strengthen the natural resources base of rural livelihood and create durable assets in rural areas which, when effectively implemented, has the potential to transform the geography of poverty. Empower rural poor through the processes of rights-based law, and discover new ways of doing business as a model of governance reform anchored on the principles of transparency and grassroots democracy, and though fosters conditions for inclusive growth ranging from basic wage, security, and recharging rural economy to a transformative empowerment process of democracy. The National Rural Employment Guarantee will ensure that up to 100 days of paid work per year for poor adults. It aims to reduce poverty by providing extra work for those who need it, while also providing empowerment and insurance when other sources of work dry up. It will guarantee employment at a predetermined wage aimed at providing income security to the otherwise unemployed, has been a long-standing stable policy for governments worldwide, starting with the Poor Employment Act of 1817 in Britain, and later on the New Deal programs in the United States in the 1930s. Government's intervention in the labor market as an employer of the last resort has been adopted as an integral feature of labor market policies in many developing countries over the last few decades. We can take example with the special public works that Nigeria wanted to do, empowering 1,000 from each local government or so. Recent examples of the latter include public work programs in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Philippines, Egypt, Botswana, Kenya, and Chile. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it is now widely recognized that labor market intervention through rural EGS programs generate both income support for the poor as well as raise agricultural productivity over the long run. As examples, the EGS in Maharashtra has been credited with averting a famine during the drought of the 1970s and 73, and alleviating poverty, while the Rural Public Works Program in Bangladesh has been commended for its contribution to rural development and increased agricultural production through the creation and maintenance of rural infrastructure. In this context, the NREG can be thought of as a policy to boost rural income, stabilize agricultural production, and reduce rural-urban migration. This bill therefore provides a legal guarantee for 100 days of employment in every financial year to adult members of any rural household willing to do public works, related unskilled manual work at the statutory minimum wage. The Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development will be monitoring the entire implementation of this scheme in association with the state governments. Mr. President, distinguished senators, I solicit your support for the second reading of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Comrade Senator Smart Ademi.
Mr. President, I want to thank you once again. I rise to support this bill, Mr. President. In supporting this bill, Mr. President, I want to commend Mr. President. Unemployment is a serious problem in our country, and in fact, Mr. President, it's a global problem. But like it's been done in many nations of the world, they have in place a social security agency. Perhaps, Mr. President, more than any government in contemporary Nigeria, this government invested so much in palliatives measures towards alleviating the suffering of people. But I think, Mr. President, we must be honest with ourselves that good as that intention of government with this palliative is, in many areas it was abused. It was abused because even the downtrodden people that were championing their cause, many of them are not honest. You see a lot of duplications of names when you are asking for people to submit names for palliatives. So I think, Mr. President, the time has come for us to take the problem of unemployment as a serious national issue that demands emergency solution. We must put the laws in place to establish an agency formally for social security. And it must be an agency, Mr. President, that will spread across all the local government areas that we have in our country, so that they can take stock of those people who are qualified to benefit from social security. And in doing that, of course, the BVN will be one thing that must be put in place, so that those who are working, who are gainfully employed, will not come and abuse it. In our nation today, Mr. President, most of these palliatives that this present government has put in place, it has been abused, because you have a situation where names are duplicated. It's even difficult for you to know who you are serving, you are benefiting. So I think the bill that my brother is seeking is for us to improve upon this bill, Mr. President, is to have a formal agency for social security that will take care of unemployment problems and even health problems of people who are not gainfully employed. It must be holistic. This bill is good, the intention is good, but I think, Mr. President, this bill must go further to make it a holistic solution to the problem of unemployment in our nation, so that it is not abused, and so that in every local government of Nigeria, you have an agency in charge who will take care of problem of unemployment of our people. And that when they are benefiting, they could benefit directly, and we can monitor it. Because we just say rural employment guarantee bill. This law, on what framework will it work? We must have the framework in place, and we must have the law in place. And in having the law, it must be equally have the punitive measures of those who will abuse it, so that people will know that this bill is intended to alleviate the suffering of people, and by extension, Mr. President, guarantee security of our nation. Most of the people who are into crime today is out of frustration of unemployment. We have a large army of people unemployed today. We have up to 200 universities and polytechnics producing graduates. So I think, Mr. President, we must advise our government, be progressive as this government is with palliatives. This palliative is being abused. Let us formalize the palliative measures, having a social security agency in every local government of Nigeria, and let us put the law in place that will make sure that nobody abuses it. I so submit, Mr. President.
And I represent Enugu East Senatorial Zone. I thank distinguished Senator for bringing up this bill. It's all about poverty. Africa has gone through several assaults. Assault of slavery, assault of colonialism, military adventurism, death, enslavement, and now poverty. Poverty index in Nigeria is about 52%. It means that over 89 million Nigerians live under extreme poverty, absolute poverty. Despite the so-called economic growth in our country, it has not affected the incidence of poverty, because economic growth without economic development means poverty, inequality, and unemployment. What this bill has addressed is that poverty cannot just disappear. Government has to take a concerted action to address poverty. Talked about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the New Deal 1933 that addressed poverty, the Marshall Plan that addressed poverty, and of course the Great Society by Lyndon Baines Johnson. So what it means that our country has to take concerted action, not just intermittent palliatives, but actions that are permanent, that are holistic, to address poverty. It is only when that is done that poverty can be addressed in this country. So I subscribe and support this bill. Thank you.
Much, Mr. President. I am Senator livelihood, and I represent Nasarawa West. Mr. President, very distinguished colleagues, this bill, or this proposed bill, touches the emotion, if not the conscience, of every Nigerian who is in a position to have an assessment of the position of Nigerians, particularly the youth, in terms of this poverty index and the need to salvage what we can salvage at the nick of time. Mr. President, going back to the time when we made an effort as a country to develop our 2020 agenda, the issue of what to do to salvage our youth from the clutches of poverty was addressed, and what one asks today is whether we were thorough enough in that effort and to what extent we went to implement the 2020 agenda, even after the amendments to that agenda. This administration can be commendable, or be commended rather, for the effort it has made to address social security in the country. Mr. President, I don't think we've ever had a time like we have now where the vulnerability of our youth in the regime of poverty that they have to live their lives, and as a result of vulnerability, how they get easily mobilized, in the kind of banditry that we have been fighting as a country over time. The risk that we face in the security, the army of soldiers recruited for this banditry and insurgency
constituency is our youth. And this youth, the preponderance of this youth are from the rural areas. And if we have had in place the relevant, applicable social security system, probably the vulnerability will not have been as deep as we experience today. There is therefore a pressing need for us to take a look at this bill and to apply it in the face of making every Nigerian believe that we are in a state of emergency as far as the issue of salvaging our youth from the risks that they face for being mobilized, to do the wrong against their motherland. They do this not because they have choice. Some of them don't have choices. Their orientation is poor, and poverty itself is at the bedrock of the society in which they find themselves. This being the case, we have to find a way to address the issue of the effort the government has done this far in the social security opportunities that government has unfolded over the past 5-6 years. Poverty alleviation is at the center of this bill, and we need to stand up to it, to address it, to secure our young ones. They run the risk of not only exposing themselves, their lives, to danger, but where they are able to do so, to get drafted, the entire country faces the danger that their youthful energies will exert on us. I believe very strongly that this bill will go a long way to cushion some of the problems that our youth face, particularly in the rural areas of this great country. I so support the bill.
Deputy Leader.
Mr. President, even either by the operators or even the beneficiaries, you find a situation where a man will write his name, his wife's name, his children's name as beneficiary of one program. And personally, I've lost count of the various programs introduced by this country. You have the traders' money, you have the money market, you have the direct bank transfer, you have the one being implemented by the central bank. There are so many. Ministry of Labor has its own. Trade and investment has its own. Education has its own. And they are not coordinated. Agriculture has its own. Central bank has its own. So I think the time has come when all these things have to be coordinated. Humanitarian affairs has its own. They should be coordinated, and as my colleague said, there should be an agency in charge to make sure that this is sanitized and this thing gets to the right people. The need for this to be qualified is seen in the US, where Trump tried desperately to kill Obamacare. He couldn't kill it because it's been codified. So if this is codified, it will be a legacy that this administration will leave for Nigerians. And I'm sure Nigerians will be happy that they have a situation where the poor and the unemployed will be taken care of. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished Senators, a bill for an act to provide for the enhancement of livelihood security of the household in rural areas, 47, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the enhancement of livelihood security of the households in rural areas of the country by providing at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment in every financial year to every household whose adult members volunteer to do unskilled manual work and for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. 2021 second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Committee on Agricultural Development report by within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.